Jeeva Corja, Foilsharov, Arish. Hi, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or if you're watching a recording of this Fireside Chat. And this is Fireside Chat 102. Emer Burke here, where I'm in conversation with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovids and Druids. But first, I will start with a prayer for peace. Gamara Shiakon ar fud na crinne. Gamara Shiakon in our Jaili, agus in our Jirha. Ganairi Lin, in our Kujgarmaka, Gamuj Buichas Jeev, Jeha Quivdaga, a spirit Quivdaga. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that the swords be beaten into plowshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So you're all very, very welcome, and let's see where you're all from. This is Pat from Ulster. Hello before the house blows down. Well, there is a gate. Well, by American standards, no, but by our standards, there are strong winds. We have, I think, a yellow status warning for here. It's quite windy, wild, and my house overlooks the River Nore, which is a beautiful river, and now it's like Avalon. There's a huge, I overlook a floodplain. It doesn't affect me. So a wet and windy Edinburgh, New York, wet and windy, that's in London. A soaked Pacific Northwest, the Netherlands, New Zealand, from Nelson. Lovely to see somebody from New Zealand. From somewhere on the Tipperary-Clare border, that's Alan. Arden, Delaware, lovely. Beautiful, snowy Montreal. Oh, the first bit of snow. Okay, our coldness is it's mild here. Well, 5 degrees. Blustery Slough, New Hampshire. Wait a second. Where else are people from? Somebody, Paul, I think he's someplace in England. Just got soaked taking his dog out to the seafront. So lots of few flashes of sun through the rain this week. So it's wonderful, wet and windy. So you're all very, very welcome. And we are going to Phoenix, Arizona, where my guest is complaining of the cold. It's 18 degrees centigrade, 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So let me introduce you to Paul Tracy. Paul, you are so, so welcome.
Thanks again for inviting me to spend some time with you, Emer.
Great. So, and Blake, your friend, is here. I've just seen him on the chat. So, I'm just intrigued that you're saying it was cold. And when you said it was 18 degrees, I think you're lucky. So, it's cold, wet, slushy, windy Finland. So you're really on the, yes, Philippa says positively tropical weather. So tell us what it's like in Phoenix, Arizona, your landscape. I know it's a desert, so.
Sure. So, we're in the American Southwest, state of Arizona. I'm actually in the Phoenix metro area, small city that's actually bordered by 2 or 3 other cities and one of the Indian reservations. Okay. So the entire section of Phoenix is actually surrounded by mountains. So there are mountain chains all around, which is kind of pretty. You can go out and see a mountain almost wherever you're looking. But it actually puts us in a bowl. So if you had stood up, you would see, the Phoenix area. So it's actually nicknamed the Valley of the Sun. Oh. So for those of us that live here, though, we lovingly refer to it as the surface of the sun. It is hot here. So I told you, I actually did the calculations ahead of time. So in the summertime, our average temperature is 112 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's 44 degrees Celsius.
That's the average.
That's the average. And we've gotten as high as 122 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 50 degrees Celsius. So it's hot. It's also very dry here. So our humidity is anywhere between 0 and 10% on average. So it's hot, it's dry. So obviously we don't have the same plants, the same flora and fauna that you would have, or actually most of the states have. It's just very different, very hot, very dry. We do have, it's called the monsoon season. So around June 15th, it starts. It's kind of unpredictable, and that's its nature. We have very unpredictable storms. The weather patterns become unstable, and we could have, it's called a microburst. We'd have a microburst in one little section of town that causes extreme damage. It's almost the same force as a tornado, but it comes down instead of across. Really crazy storms. You know, they blow in out of nowhere at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon and will dump tons of rain. We get almost our entire rainfall in that one section of the year.
Wow.
So all of the differences that I've experienced in the desert, living in the desert in the Southwest, that was actually one of the first challenges for me when I started my Druid studies. You know, obviously we don't have oak trees.
Yes.
We don't have. It's funny. I have a running joke with my first mentor. Where can I find some heather? You know, no one could figure out how can I experience heather, you know, other than a picture. And then the animals are different too. Mm-hmm. So I very early on had to start building a relationship, you know, with the plants, with the animals that I had available, and sort of make an equivalency between what I was reading, what I was studying, and what I had available to interact with.
Wow. So how did you meet that challenge?
So, you know, part of our studies, we learned to kind of start to connect to the energy around us, whether it's plants, animals, stones, the weather itself. And I just started kind of reaching out and feeling what the energy was, and tried to, I might not have an oak tree available, but I actually grew up in the Midwest. So I have seen trees. I know what a season is. But so we picture an oak. We picture strength and you know, purpose and the center, the belonging. And so what do I feel in the desert represents that? And so for me, it's an ironwood. We have tree, just the name alone tells you we have ironwood trees, and they're very strong, very sturdy, very stable.
And why they're called ironwood? Exactly.
When you see one out in the desert, you know that it's an ironwood tree. It sort of holds its own. It sets the space in the desert. What's kind of interesting too is they're very smart trees. So if you have a stand of ironwood trees, they cycle their blooming season, so they don't compete with each other. So every 3 years, you can tell, let's say that there's 15 trees. 5 of them will bloom 1 year. The others will remain dormant. The next cycle, the next 5 will bloom. And they rotate so that they're not competing for pollinators. You know, they can each have their own turn, and they have the chance to spread just as much as their neighbor. So, and just, you know, one by one, you know, we have certain plants that are very prevalent, you know, that we walk down just our suburb street and we run into them all the time. Another example is ocotillo. So ocotillo is a desert plant where it looks like just a bunch of canes, like picture a bunch of pencils with spikes coming off of them. Okay. It's meant to be ornamental. You know, we have them in our yard, our neighbors have them, but the native populations use them for building and mainly for fencing, because they are so strong and they're spiky. You know, they keep people out.
Right. Yeah.
So the impression I got from those are protection, you know, setting up borders, surrounding things. So there might not be an exact equivalent to one of our traditional trees or plants that we're typically working with, but it's a plant that I can connect with that has some meaning for me.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. John King, who's in Ardnamurchan up in Scotland, I bet you have a fantastic night sky if you're outside town. Do you?
Yeah. So
you have a lot of light pollution from given that you're in a city.
So we're actually in something called a dark sky neighborhood, and it is it's legislated how much light we can have for that purpose. So we are fortunate, even though we're in a suburb. I mentioned the mountains all around the town. We are just a little bit up in the mountains, so we're closer. You know, we can see things a little bit better, and we don't have that light pollution because of that legislation. So yes, we do. But the other thing I forgot to mention about the skies, the one thing I love about Arizona that I haven't seen anywhere else in the States, and I have had the opportunity to travel to a lot of different states for my job, we have incredible sunrises and sunsets.
Oh.
I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the way the mountains are arranged, or the fact that we do have such low humidity. We also have a lot of dust in the air too. I think that actually helps. But the clouds just light up, and we have purples and oranges and pinks that you would say don't occur in nature, but they do, because I've seen them. They're fluorescent. They're incredible. So that if I ever had to move for some reason, that's probably the first thing that I would miss, would be the sunrises and sunsets.
Wow, just beautiful. Interesting comments here. So like John, who asked the question, dark skies where he is, but usually cloudy. And I can see plenty of dark sky here when it's a clear night, of course. So Blake says, Paul, I'm going to begin expecting sunset and sunrise photos. So people are saying it sounds magical, and others are saying couldn't cope in a desert. Michelle, who's from Irish, she said she couldn't cope with the heat we had last summer. I actually loved it. Although I've lived in the desert in northern Kenya for a year and a half, and that was 40 degrees. Luckily dry heat, but I missed the trees. I would gather when I would see near a riverbed, and the riverbeds were dry. So it would rain maybe once or twice a year, just for a day. And then the seeds would germinate. So everything is brown or sandy colored. And the next day, it's a carpet of green and with white and yellow flowers. And it was just fascinating to see that something would germinate, come into bloom, and then in a few days, it's gone.
Yep.
It just like, because here in Ireland, everything is green, just. But I'm not a desert person. I'm a tree person. I really missed it. And but still, it was fascinating to be able to see it. But I learned to read the sky, because everything was flat. We didn't have the horizon was where the horizon is, at the very edge of the earth. The earth is flat. So we go all around. And I learned to read the sky. And that was just wonderful. You can't see the whole sky now where I am. There's mountains or there's trees or something else to impede it, but it's fascinating. Yeah. Catherine Farley says, the hotter the better for me. I hate this cold, wet weather. I can't wait for spring and summer. Anne says, it sounds like the Arctic. I saw sunsets and sunrise colors in Baffin Island that I would never have imagined, just as you say. So it's so David says, one of the really neat things I saw while in Arizona was the use of xeriscaping, X-E-R-I-S-scaping.
Yep.
Oh, landscaping for dry climate. Instead of using water-hungry plants, seemed more and more residents were going that way. I actually have a little plant. This is for a gift. It's I can't remember what it is.
We call them air plants.
Air plants, yeah. So you just spritz it once a week, and I'm just fascinated with these little things. So I have a little cappuccino cup. This is going to be a gift, and you put it in, and it's just really cute. What are they living on?
I think they can just absorb moisture from pretty much anywhere. So.
And the nourishment,
that I guess they would have to also be getting from I don't know, microbes, the air. Yeah, I've never seen them like in soil or anything. So that's actually a really good question.
Because they have roots, little roots, but they're just part of I think they're roots. Yeah, they're at the bottom, but it's just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
So somebody says there's nothing as ridiculous as trying to keep a green lawn in a desert. So Oh, Silver Branch says, Arizona is not all desert. I live in the Juniper and Pinyon transition zone at 5,500 feet.
Yes, that was actually one thing I was going to mention. So actually two things. You brought up a really good point too about water. But one thing that I don't think people realize is that Arizona does have a lot of different microclimates. So
Okay.
I can drive 2 miles north, like they just mentioned. I can go to Flagstaff, Arizona, and be in alpine country. So people ski. It's at like 6,000 feet. There's mountains and snow. That's actually where I went to college. I can drive maybe 3 hours southwest of here and be at the Sea of Cortez. So it's the estuaries down in Mexico. If I want to drive a little further, I can be at the ocean. So we do have a lot of these different climates. You also mentioned something about green versus brown, and somebody made the comment, aren't you tired of it? Everything's always brown. I'm like, yes, but there's so many different shades of brown. You get used to it. And also when the desert does bloom, doesn't do it often, but when it blooms, it's pretty incredible.
That's the magic, you know, the when it stands out, like when I lived in the desert, it would come up and it was like so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And they had these beautiful desert rose plants, and it was just beautiful shades of pink. And it was like, oh, this is just magic.
It is.
And so magic because they were so seldom, you know, just that beautiful, that gift that happens at times. Though I lived in Lesotho in Southern Africa for 3 years, and I remember coming home in October, and their seasons is in the Southern Hemisphere, so it doesn't rain in their winter, but the sky is blue and everything is brown. And people play golf. Now, I don't play golf, but they would talk about playing on the browns as opposed to the greens. But I remember flying into Dublin airport and looking down, and everything was green, and my eyes were drinking it in. I didn't realize how much I'd missed it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like soaking it in. And I know my eyes will soak in green, you know, when it needs it. It's like, I'm aware, I'm actually absorbing it into my body, and it's absolutely incredible. Bjorn says, have thought about moving to Arizona every winter. It's about like Wisconsin summer. Yeah.
So, and then you brought up the point about water, and we were talking just before we came on camera here. So they mentioned xeriscaping, excuse me, and that is important. So we are in the desert. It was probably not the smartest idea to start a huge metropolitan area in the middle of the desert. We're not the only one. I think we were talking about Vegas, you know, up in Nevada as well.
Yeah.
But here we are. You know, it's a very large city. To drive from one end to the other is probably several hours. It's just very large.
In the city?
In our city, yeah. It's probably a couple hours from one side to the other.
Wow.
We're just massively spread out. We have an affinity for golf courses. You know, tourism is very big here. So when you fly into Phoenix, you see all of this green, all of these golf courses, all of these neighborhoods that people spent a lot of money to move into. And you think, where's this water coming from? You know, how are they watering, you know, the golf courses or whatever? So those people that are aware of that want to be a little more ecologically sound, we do xeriscaping. And that's basically, we know what plants to plant to not need the water. So, you know, our yard, we splurge. We do have an ironwood in our yard, but it's a desert plant. Once it's established, he does his own thing. You know, ocotillos, succulents. We wouldn't think of putting a lawn in because we know the draw on the water. And we were just talking again before we came on to show the extreme effects of that. We actually have a small town about 2-3 miles from us. It's actually not that small. I think there are several hundred residents up there. They have no water. So it's a very high-end neighborhood. There are these multi-million-dollar homes up there. Starting January 1st, they lost their water. So there's no service. They have to actually truck water into each home and fill a cistern. And there's no solution. You know, nobody planned for it. There is no city service. A company offered to come in and build out the infrastructure, but it would be years. So these homeowners are having to pay this incredible expense just to get water to live there. And the environmental cost of that, to have to truck water in. So you have to pay for the fossil fuel, for the trucks to run, and the pollution, and just the inconvenience, of having to do that. I feel horrible for those residents, but that's just one example of how that could turn out. You mentioned that there's a river. Well, we have the Colorado River. The Colorado River is the main water source. The Phoenix area, Arizona in general, and Nevada are actually in water wars right now. Las Vegas and Phoenix are two big cities. We both want the water. There's one river. Who's going to get to it first? So it wasn't thought out well. And those of us, go ahead.
Is the Colorado, is that the river that doesn't get to the sea?
It physically goes. I just don't think that there's any water left by the time
it gets there.
We have the Agua Fria, which is another river. You had mentioned Tucson, so that could be the one that we were talking about. That one goes through there. That one is dry. The Phoenix area, we had a riparian environment, and they're trying to restore some of that. So it was basically desert versions of marshes, and we had egrets and some water birds and whatnot. We lost them for a while, but they're starting to come back because they're trying to repair it. But yeah, I mean, the desert wasn't the smartest place to move to, but we try to make a conscious effort to do it as best as possible.
So when you get these crazy showers of rain, is there any water harvesting?
Yes.
Is it too much damage, or is it too intense to be able to get to harvest enough of it?
So it's interesting. So I mentioned that it's very dry, and the soil, at least in the Phoenix area, it's full of caliche, which is a clay. And so when it's really dry and it's really hot, our ground is baking into a piece of pottery. So when it pours like that, there is no place for it to go. So we do have massive runoffs. Actually, up until about 4 or 5 years ago, we had to have flood insurance on our home. In the middle of the desert, we had to have flood insurance. So it does eventually run off into basins. So we have artificially created lakes around the Phoenix area to capture the water. And they're used for recreation. People go out there, swim, boat, but that's really the main purpose, is to store the water. Some of them are also used to produce electricity too, through electric turbines. But we've seen pictures, the news will go out there and they're doing news stories. You can see the sediment levels now, and where it would have been typically at a certain level this time of year, it's so low now, they're finding things that they haven't found since the 1800s. There's wagons that are popping up, or old boats that floated to the bottom. That's how bad things are for us right now. So we're hoping for a really good monsoon season this year. We had one last year, so it started building up some of the aquifers. So fingers crossed.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. And the river, the water that these, that next town, where's that coming from in those trucks? Who's supplying the water?
Well, and that's what some of us are kind of wondering. We're not sure if like side deals are being made with other towns, or they used to actually receive their water from the city that I live in, from Scottsdale. Okay. And they had a long-term contract, which ended up in January. We're assuming there are private wells out there. So if you own land, you're allowed to dig a well on it. And so they might be harvesting or pulling water up and selling it to their neighbor. There were a couple of Indian tribes that had offered to sell them water, because I mentioned we have 2 or 3 reservations very close to us. So it's their nation. They own the water rights to their own country, so they can do whatever they want. So we think a lot of it's coming from companies on the reservation related to the reservation, so that they have access to the water there.
And have enough water. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That's just something else. Yeah. Sean, who was a guest maybe a few months ago, he said there were bodies found in Lake Mead. And is Lake Mead in the US?
Yeah, it's one of our cisterns, one of our lakes. Yeah.
So what kind of bodies were found there?
I don't remember the story, but it's just the fact that the water levels are going so low. They're starting to find all sorts of things. So if you watch an old mobster movie, that's one way to hide the evidence, or get rid of an enemy. So
I was thinking of skeletons in the closet, but skeletons in the lake coming out would be going way, way back. Wow. Julia has a question. I wonder if Nestle is involved.
That could be.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who the main water purifier or water production would be, but I could see that.
Yeah, it's here we have, well, I think during the summer, not where I was. I have my own well, fortunately, but there weren't water hosepipe bans here, but they were in some parts of Ireland where it was very hot. But and we shouldn't have any problem with that in Ireland because we have so much rain. Right. But then leaking pipes, there's a lot of water that's wasted, which is such a pity. It's yeah, Blake says he remembers investigations about the bodies in Lake Mead. Certainly sounded nefarious. Yeah. Yep. So anyway. So what brought you to Druidry? I mean, what do you work at? What's your background?
Okay. Yeah, and they're totally opposite, right? Like we've already talked. So from a career perspective, I've been a scientist and I've worked in technology companies my whole life. So what kind of science? So my degree is in forensic chemistry, and I was if you've ever watched CSI.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
that was me. So I did that for 8 years. So I was a forensic scientist. I worked in the state crime laboratory, and then I went off to work for a software company. And since then, I've been in leadership management roles in software companies for the last 20-something years. So, very technology focused, very, fact-based, very, very scientific, That's the career, though. That's not necessarily me.
Okay.
So, as we mentioned, the path to Druidry, at least for me and probably for a lot of people watching, was obviously not a straight path. I was born and raised Catholic. My family was pretty devout. It just didn't fit right for me, though. Mm-hmm. So when I got to the age of consent and I could decide to do my own thing, I stopped that. Around 18 or 19, I started practicing sort of my own version of folk magic. Later on, it took me years to figure this out, but my mom passed a lot of that on to me. So I'm half Polish and half Slovenian. So in the Slavic tradition, there is a tradition of having dual faiths. And I don't remember the actual Russian name for it, but that was very common, where there would be an outward veneer or facade of being very devout Catholic or whatever, but still having these native practices. And I figured out, after looking back and having experience, my mom passed a lot of that on to me. But anyways, so I've always had this undercurrent of, the folk practice, the magic or whatever, but I've also dabbled in other things. So I spent some time studying Judaism. So I actually came very close to converting there. Didn't fit right because I'm not really an organized religion person. I figured that out. So that led me to Kabbalah. So I was studying that. So now you can see I'm starting to get a little bit more esoteric there. Mm-hmm. Studied that a little bit, moved on to New Thought and Science of Mind, kind of a combination of those and my science and more fact-based. Still nothing quite clicking yet. Always this undercurrent, though, at varying levels of commitment of folk practice, cunning, however we want to, not voodoo, but that things like that. So put that on hold. I have another practice, habit, ritual that I do every year, and I call it my knowledge challenge. So every year I will pick some topic, something that I just want to like delve into, and I commit that year to it. It might be something that I'm interested in, just never really spent a lot of time on it. It might be something that I truly want to challenge myself on, and I'll just dig in. So one year I said, what am I? I want to figure out where am I going with this? So that was my knowledge challenge for that year. I was going to dig into all of the different facets of esoteric study and religions and just see what I could do. So I started doing mind maps. What are the things that actually attract me? Nature or physical based religion or practice, and this underlying current of magic and the magical thought, or controlling, creating my own reality, things like that. As I was doing that, I was actually more focused or bringing up more information about Wicca, which didn't really fit with me. But as I did that, because of our sort of tied relationship early on, I started reading more and more about Druids and Druidry. Now, I have to admit, when I first read all of that and started studying it, my thought about Druids was that it was more of a social organization or a philosophy very similar to Freemasonry. That was my thought going in. I knew of it, didn't really know much about it. But as I started studying it, I'm like, wait a minute. This is seeming more like me. Let me dig into this more. And I've got shelves and shelves of books that I started with. And I came across, the OBOD site, started reading about it, started reading other people's reactions about the different organizations. And so I thought, well, let me do the training program. Let me start the study program. I was probably three lessons on the third course, and I'm like, this is it. This is it for me. And it sunk in. Every single one I read, I just absorbed, I devoured it. I faithfully did all the practices, but it wasn't hard because I loved doing all of the work. I couldn't get enough. I just kept working through it, and I made it, I devoted the time for it, but it wasn't a chore. I just loved doing the work. And now I've steadily worked through the study program, and I've absorbed all the information. I think I'm maybe like one packet left on my Druid grade. I've just really enjoyed it, and it has just consolidated and brought a lot of the things together that a lot of loose ends were tied up for me. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. So that's how I landed where I'm at.
Wow. So you mentioned, because we were talking earlier, you've been to New Orleans and you mentioned voodoo.
Yeah.
And what did you think, or what was your reaction to it?
So it's funny, as you start studying different practices, different spiritual beliefs, they're different, but they're the same. There are so many threads that go through everything. They just look a little bit different. And I don't know if we'll get into this in a different topic, but one of the things that sort of came to light for me in my studies was working with our ancestors has always been a little bit difficult for me. Part of the reason, I know what my heritage is. I mentioned I'm Polish, Slovenian, but my parents did not know their ancestors very well. So my dad was an orphan. My mom was just very closed. And I think, we figured out why after a while, but she was just very closed. Didn't know much about my family, but I knew about my ancestry. And so during our work, when we're working with our ancestors, when we're working with our timeline, I wanted to try to connect with that Slavic background. But honestly, at first, I shied away from it because a lot of the, and I hope I don't offend anyone that might be listening now or later, but a lot of the contemporary presentation of that, I think has been warped. You know, there's a lot of nationalistic, a lot of white supremacy that has worked its way into the Slavic native faiths. So I have always I shied away from it. But I did find a few writers during my studies, I think it was during my OVATE grade, that kind of opened the way for me to study a little bit more. And as I did, that allowed me to be more comfortable. And instead of connecting with how some people were interacting with the faith, basically I connected directly with the gods and goddesses. So I am a polytheist. I think I'm what you would call a pure polytheist. They are real. They're real.
As opposed to an impure one.
As opposed to archetypes. Yes, we have archetypes in our psychology, but I think that there are gods and goddesses that just represent those archetypes. They are not the archetypes. So they're real people for me. But as I started working with them, I felt more comfortable. And so that brought to light some of the folk practices, hard versus soft.
Yeah, I'd heard reading about that the other day, and I knew there was a phrase for, okay, yeah. So we're the hard one. All right.
Yeah. So the hard. So I was learning more about herbal practices. So I'd always been drawn to, herbal healing, and whether it's making brews or making ointments or whatever, that was actually something that was passed on to me by my mom, which I didn't realize what she was doing until later. But that's an important part of the Slavic faith. There were so many similarities with what we learned as Druids. I was really surprised. Just the symbolism of trees, and they're different trees, but the tree of life. The gods and goddesses have very similar traits. Obviously, our interaction with nature. So there are no Slavic Druids, but their shamanic figures were very similar to what we would envision, a historic Druid to have been. They were stories.
Where does what territory does your Slavic ancestors? Because obviously, I mean, how many countries does that ancestry cover?
So for me personally, it would be the eastern part of Europe, from the northern shore all the way down to basically northern Italy and a little bit into Russia. But the Slavs actually covered much more. They were almost all the way over to the west coast there. But for me, it's that sliver right along the edge of what had been Russia, and a little bit into it, because I do have a little bit of Russian blood as well. So
were your parents first generation? Were they born in the U.S. or were they?
Yeah, they were first generation. So
they're both first generation. Okay.
Yeah.
Was your mother the Polish woman? Polish.
Yes,
okay. That's the Catholic piece.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was an absolutely masterful gardener, and when I was really young, your parents do things and you kind of make note of it, but you're not giving it a lot of weight. You just kind of remember things. It was obviously much later when I went back and I'm like, she was actually doing a spell. Every spring, the house would get completely surrounded by lilies of the valley.
Lovely.
And as she was planting them, she would say something in Polish. And I don't remember what it is. And I don't even know what she was saying. But she would say the same thing with each one. And then she would go around with a water bucket. And as she watered each one, she said something different. And then afterwards, she went around the entire house and did the same thing. And so you're just like, yeah, Mom's doing something kind of weird with the lilies of the valley. But afterwards, I realized, I think there was something more there. Same thing when she was a good cook. So when she was cooking things, there were certain ways she did it, certain ways she prepared it. And actually, I found out after the fact, she used to wear a pentagram or a pentacle.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that until I was much older, because I remembered a specific event where I don't remember what she was doing, but she basically leaned over, and I'm actually wearing an awen, but she leaned over, and it fell out of her shirt, her blouse, and I asked her about it. It was maybe like 5 or 6. She's like, don't worry about that. Don't. This is just for mom to know. Don't tell grandma about this. And it stuck. So.
And grandma was her mother.
Yeah.
Not her mother. Is your mom still alive?
No, my parents. So I was actually the last of the batch of my brothers and sisters, and I came much later. So my parents were actually in their late 40s or 50s when they had me. So they've been gone for quite a while now.
Okay. It's interesting, when seeing parents do strange things and never asking, and then only realizing it so much later.
Yeah.
When it's too late to ask those questions. If only I had asked that then. You think you've loads of time, or it doesn't seem so important. And it's not until in hindsight you begin to realize that what you were exposed to as a child or as a teenager, and now as an adult, really wanting to know. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Frances says she visited a place in Poland where there are 5 stone circles. So she says, we know there are ritual landscape correspondences between the Slavic and Druid cosmologies.
Yeah.
Are Polish considered Slavic?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Because you said there were no Druids among the Slavs, but I have met people from Lithuania, Latvia. Now I always get them all over there mixed up, and they said that there were Druids there, going way back.
Yeah, and that could be. I mean, when you read some of the chronicles, the old books that were written in Russian, they never made any reference to that specifically. Where like if you read some of the old Roman testaments or history books, they mention specifically, the Celts or the Celtic tribes and Druids and whatnot. But reading some of the old folk tales and some of the stories, it's really the shamanic characters, at least for me, that kind of have that overlay. So the practice was there, they just named it something different.
Okay. That's wonderful. Yeah, Anne says, I saw a documentary about an oak tree traditional festival in the forests of Lithuania. She said it was incredible. Carmen, I don't know if you can answer, were the Scythians from that area?
That I don't know.
I don't think so, because the Scythians, they have an Irish connection. I think it was Neva. He was a precursor to the Tuatha Dé Danann. They came from Scythia, as far as I know. And Poppy says, and you have a good point here, she says that it might not have been called Druids, but practiced the same thing because the word might not have been used. And then Gabriella says, Eastern Europe has a lot of traditions and customs linked to the Wheel of the Year. Plat work, tree work, natural shamanism. Yeah. So to get back to I'd asked you about what you thought of voodoo, and then we kind of diverged, and I was fascinated because we've both been to New Orleans. So what resonated with you?
So kind of like you were mentioning, it's first of all the obvious connection with the Catholic background that I had. So you some things are just readily recognizable, but then it takes a second for you to realize, oh wait, there is a veneer here. As I mentioned, there's the Slavic, we have that dual faith thing. So it's just kind of the way we do it too, where you might have a saint that's actually representing one of the gods or goddesses or a different spirit, and that's how you interact with them. So I saw it, and I felt immediately comfortable with it, and I understood what was going on. And obviously, you just have to be very careful and recognize that is their practice, their faith. I can enjoy it, appreciate it, understand what they're doing, but it's not my place to participate. But I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I was you know, that going into the museum, the Voodoo Museum, and seeing the central altar, and it looked like a Christian, well, a Catholic, because the Catholics like the graven images, statues of, you know, Mary, Saint Martin, Saint Patrick, Saint Bridget, all of these that, for any good Catholic person, from say my mother's generation, would have thought, oh, that's a Catholic altar. The only thing that would have been different would be the dollar notes and the cigar and the offerings of rum. But I was fascinated, you know, about the loi, the I don't know if it's the right word, the spirit behind the veneer of the statues or of the saints, like Maman Brigitte, Damballa, St. Patrick, and there's so many others. I was just, so Pat, because she was with me, some bits of the museum reminded me of Holy Wells at Home, offerings and messages, though of a different type. Absolutely. I was just fascinated just by there. But yeah, Voodoo wouldn't be for me, but I was just blown away by it. Very, very interesting to, and you know, it gets such a bad press when it's like voodoo dolls and how awful it is, and zombies and things like that. And it really, I was fascinating to discover that voodoo dolls were for healing. You know, that you get an effigy of the person who's sick and you stick the needles in the place where they need healing. And of course, obviously, if something has the power to do good, the inverse is the same. It can also do bad. And that really found that fascinating. Ferdiad McGowan, I don't know if you are one, Ferdiad, maybe you are. Recovering Roman Catholics make great pagans, druids, or ceremonial magicians. Anything with smells, bells, and fancy costumes. You probably are. Yes, I agree. It's that the richness of ritual. And I remember Howard, my late husband, he came from a Quaker tradition, and like he went to a Quaker school and went to, his parents weren't Quakers, but the school he went to. And so every Sunday they went to a meeting, and you sat in silence in a circle until the spirit moved somebody to speak or not. And no elderhood, no ritual, no priests, no dogma, the Bible as an historical document. And so when we met and we were going to get married, he was like petrified of ritual, terrified. And at that point I had left my Catholic one. So I was very, very, for a long time, I left ritual too. I was very, very uncomfortable with it. And then managed to, we wove a ceremony that included silence and ritual. So when he became a druid, I was the front of house, and he was the firekeeper, the holder of space, that silent person. And actually, you know, we designed together his funeral. So it was a druid funeral. Pat says, a school friend said to me that if she had been Catholic, she'd still be Christian. The yearning for powerful ritual was there, even if the belief was not. And my thing was, what I loved, the ritual I liked with Catholicism was benediction, which was the bells and smells. So it was candles, incense, and chanting, not the mass so much. So it's just fascinating how. And again, with I had a friend, she's a member of the order actually, who had been in Haiti. And if you were a Catholic, you were voodoo. If you were Protestant, you were not. That somehow Catholicism, with their graven images and their bells and their smells, could facilitate that the slaves weren't allowed to practice their African religions. So they took on Catholicism and very cleverly said, fine, we'll do that. And we'll just have them as a veneer for our own loi, and we can practice in our own way, which I thought was lovely. What is it? Bjorn says, the worst thing I ever heard a Catholic priest say was the Bible should be great and learnt, not memorized and quoted. That's perhaps true. Anyway, so just comments about Quaker meeting houses, loving the freedom of them. Yes, because there's no dogma. Like we have no dogma in Druidry, and but I do like the ritual, and I love incense, and I like candles, and I like fire, and so that's fascinating. So how has, I don't know how long you're in the order, but how has Druidry helped you or supported you your life? or what impact has it made on you in terms of what profound change has?
Right. Well, so two things there. So first of all, a big portion of my training was actually done during the pandemic.
Okay.
So, you know, we were all under a lot of stress. There was a lot of things going on that we didn't understand. So my studies at that time, it gave me something to hold on to, something to focus on, something that it was like one of the few stable things in my life at that time. So I always knew that, you know, Sunday was going to be my day when I opened my next lesson, and I was going to do my work for the week and or longer, depending upon what it was. And so I can attribute my Druid studies to helping me get through that whole thing, the whole pandemic, you know, having to work from home and all that other craziness. But all that aside, the one thing that if somebody asked me, what does Druidry do for you? What does it do? It basically helps you integrate yourself into a whole to be the best version of you can be.
Okay.
You're not perfect. You're not expected to be perfect, but you're going to be you. And that's what I think it did most for me. So for me, the Bardic grade was being. So learning about myself, my place in the environment, in the universe. Ovate was doing, you know. So now, what are the things that I can expend my energy on or bring energy into me? How do I interact with the world? And Druid has been thinking. So being, doing, and thinking. Now, how do you take everything that we have learned and bring this into my core being? You know, how do I make it a true part of me? And that's it. I mean, it's the training that we go through is so broad and deep. We have the opportunity to learn and experience so much, but it's brilliant in a way because there's something for everyone. You know, you're not going to be adept at every single topic. You can't be adept at every single topic that we touch on, but there are going to be the little bits and pieces that spark with you that that make things light up, you know, that make you that better version, and you just bring it all together. And that's what I would attribute Druidry. It's coming to that point where I know who I am, I know what I want to be, and I'm comfortable with all that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. What would you Julia says here, she started the Ovate grade June 2020 and missed the discipline that she had with the Bardic grade. That lockdown really stalled her and still trying to find it hard to get going again. It's interesting how the confinement of the pandemic, it got me back to my herbs. You know, I am a herbalist and I've been so busy, and then I got back out foraging and drying my herbs, making tinctures again, and I've kept it up. You know, since I've kind of gone on the road again, I've still been able to do that, and I really enjoy that and really value it.
Yeah, same here.
And it's lovely to be, you know, that best possible version of yourself. And I think that's an important one, rather than being a pure good person, you know, or a saintly person or a pious druid, if there's ever any such thing. But but it's that best possible version of yourself. Kevin has a question. Do you have a local group, or have you studied solitarily this whole time?
Yeah, I've been a solitary the whole time. Part of the reason is just practical. Again, very large area, desert. There aren't a lot of druids that I know of here.
Okay.
And to try to get us together in a group where we can actually do any kind of practice where it's somewhat comfortable would be hard. I think there is one forming or has formed recently down in the Tucson area. I just haven't investigated that at all. But the solitary stuff has basically just been the way I've done my practice for most of my life.
Okay. Gabriella, I'll put it up on the screen. She says, Paul has so much light in him. He truly beams.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I suppose I have a group, and started off, created one because I didn't know anybody. Of It's a mixed group. It's eclectic. It's not OBOD members or even people who might identify as Druids, but that they celebrating the Wheel of the Year resonates with them. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about the teachings of the order and the order itself, that you can, wherever you are, be a Druid, and you can study go through the grades if you so wish, and you can study the Gwers on your own. It's nice to be able to do it in real. I really, really appreciate that, but it is possible, that you have your inner grove and you have your garden or whatever your environment is to practice. What would you?
Sorry, real quick, I was going to mention too. One of the things that was really valuable to me, the mentor program. So I'm sure it was coincidental, but my first mentor, and if you're watching or if you happen to watch this later, again, Cherry, thank you so much for everything that you gave me. She was from Australia.
So Cherry Carroll, yeah.
Yeah, so she could totally relate to what I was doing with the Southwestern stuff. And that's why we had the joke going about not being able to find some stuff. But yeah, that was really helpful too. So having that mentorship, even if you don't have a big group, if you are studying and you haven't taken advantage of interacting with your mentor, please do. They're there for you. And I hope to be able to do that someday in the future too.
Great. And where do you get your? I know you're a writer. You do some writing, because I know you have a bardic piece that you're going to share some of it anyway. Where do you get your Awani or Imas? Where does it come from?
So sometimes it's just sparks, and those are actually the better ones, and it's usually it's something deep inside. The other thing that we kind of talked about too is I'm a bit of a jokester. I'm kind of an imp, so humor. So I do things that are kind of funny, kind of like a little, I won't say off color, but a little off center. So I like to make people laugh. So if I've got something that is a little bit light, a little bit humorous, that will kind of spark some writing. Okay. But yeah, if I'm going to share a piece, that's not the one that I have for today.
Okay, so would you like to share a piece, seeing as we're talking about it?
Yeah, I will do that. So this is it's a very long poem, so I'm not going to share the whole thing. I do have a good stopping point for it though, and I wrote this very, very early on, and when I look back on it, for me, when I look at my Druid studies and where I'm at now, it's almost prophetic. And I've read this a lot of times, and I will warn you, I will tear up and choke up at least in one.
It's allowed.
Because I know what's coming up. So, all right. So this is actually called Behind the Oak Door. So, to escape my troubles and be alone, I went for a walk in a woodland unknown. Unfamiliar the land and dark the track, I moved forward, unsure if I'd ever come back. Out the corner of my eye, something looked like a door. What in the world could that even be for? I walked up the bank for a better look. Entwined in ivy was an oak door carved like a book. On its surface were marks and strange symbols galore, slashes, lines, and dashes, and little more. At the end of one line was a silver ring. I gave a slight tug and it started to sing. Green light like lightning raced up my arm. The door opened and I looked in, prepared for harm. Braced for dangerous things to appear. I felt a gentle, warm breeze and heard water near. Crossing over the doorstep, I looked down, my stride broke. I was now wearing a tunic and a sky blue wool cloak. I felt different, stronger, not quite like me. I thought, well, let's keep moving and see what we see. Entering a meadow with wild flowers about, the sweet fragrance of blossoms drawing bees out to scout. Walking further, a bramble hedge, tenacious in growth. Pausing only a moment, I leapt over, was scratched and uttered an oath. The next field was grape heavy, the harvest just started. As I walked on further, my mental cloud parted. A wall of sage was now protecting the way. With my focused intention, from my path it did sway. Hiking further and further for what seemed like days. Finally, I arrived at a shimmering haze. I found a golden hazel tree laden with nuts. The ground was strewn with shells full of fresh cuts. I was hungry from wandering, and the food appeared free, so I ate a hazelnut. No one would see. I remembered a warning about eating in dreams, but this is real, I think, or so it seems. My head spun, heart surged, and muscles throbbed. Was it the tree getting back at me for being robbed? Go further, my son, I heard in my head. I walked on, and suddenly the whole world went red. Within a rose-colored glow stood a lady fair, that incredible light shining from her scarlet hair. Beautifully curved, dressed in lavender and green, she wore plants like jewels, something I'd never seen. What struck me what struck me most was the grief clear in her eyes. My child is lost. Please find him before he dies. Not one for heroics, but still yearning to serve. My lady, I'll find him, if I can just find the nerve. What is your name, should I ever need to call you? My name is Madrone, but that you already knew. So it goes on from there. I use like traditional, hero's journey. Have a couple otherworldly adventures, receive a gift from the goddess, and ultimately it's the wisdom that I received. If it's not obvious, the child that I'm looking for, the lost child, turns out to be me at the end.
Sean, it was really beautiful. I was taken in. I didn't want you to stop. It was like, no, I want to get to the end, because Sean says you're an absolute wordsmith. It was so vivid and moving on all the senses. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean.
And please continue, said Gabriella. Beautiful. Would love to listen to the whole poem. Please, please. Beautiful. Can you give us a little bit more?
Okay. I don't know how much time we had. It's long, but all right. It was the need of another that drove me to action. My own wants and desires don't have that same traction. 'Twas the third week of September when I entered that door. Here, orange and maroon now dotted the floor. The day and the night are of equal time. Journeying further, now with purpose I did climb. The ground sloped upward hard with almost no stop, with clouds near and air dry as I reached the top. As dusk approached, I looked to the sky, circling above. I watched a large blackbird fly. It spiraled down fast towards me, landing at my feet. Spreading his wings quite fully, it did chatter sweet. It appeared to be pointing one wing in each way, one way up a path, the other to a gateway. I chose the road less traveled and entered the gate. Not knowing the next moment would determine my fate. Going through the gate, all became quiet and still. Only a few yards away stood a stag on a hill. The stag's antlers were horned 3 by 3 on each side. He too bore a star, 5 points his fur could not hide. Approaching me quickly, he grew 4 times in size, and as it neared, I saw roaring flames in its eyes. It took to 2 legs and formed the shape of a man. Still horned, he approached and put out his hand. I thought to run, but instead held my ground. Looking into his eyes, I felt purified and profound. He smiled, took my hand in a warm, firm grip. We're friends now, my brother. Please continue your trip. Moving past him, I found another clearing. Though tired and drained, I trod on, with night quickly nearing. A white owl flew past, dropping a pebble in my boot. I bent over, pulled out a black pearl with some soot. Gently polishing the pearl on my cloak, dyed and wode, the surface became mirrored and nearly glowed. In that sphere, I could see my reflection clearly. I thought, that treasure you hold must be treated dearly. Yearning to lay down, I found a yew tree. Sleep quickly overtook me in a vision I did see. An eagle I became, soaring through the night air. I felt a sense of renewal and courage and dare. Awaking at morning, I was ready for what came. My time as an eagle had restored my inner flame. That child is lost and must be found. Madron's child must be returned, so I covered more ground. Later, entering a grove, I came upon a well. Propping my arms on the ledge, I rested a spell. The sun glittered inside with an odd jeweled-like tone. I thought rubies or carnelians, but it was a salmon, all alone. Up to the surface, he erupted with a splash, and a few drops touched my lips, and all became clear in a flash. The wisdom he just shared showed the error of my thinking. I stumbled and swooned and started blinking. The lost child I've been seeing was not Madron's, but me. I was lost, but in this journey found a truer way to be. With this thought still in mind, Lady Madron appeared. You've gained so much in your journey. It was challenging as feared. My lost child has been found. It was you, that is true. Here's my gift to reward you on your new breakthrough. A staff she handed me, encrusted in gems, amber and amethyst wrapped in platinum stems. Keep this near to remind you of what you have learned. Your strength comes from within, and your success is well earned. Challenges come neither from me nor some ivory tower. You create them yourself when you doubt your own power. I'm grateful, my lady, for the lesson you've taught. That gift is precious, cherished, and could never be bought. I'm here forever at this balance of day and night, said the lady, fading to a single point of light. With a gentle pop, the light extinguished and closed. In that moment, I awoke where at home I had dozed. That dream, or was it, was a message clear. A bard's training gives insight, both noble and dear.
Ah, beautiful. There's lovely comments here. Yes, the words are compelling, completely drawing listeners in and within. Absolutely beautiful and meaningful. Brought me to tears, thank you. That was from Eric. And then Sandy, a beautiful elemental journey through your poetry. Thank you. It's truly magical. Incredible weaving of words, the emotional depth. There's loads here. I can't get, they're also coming up. The words take you on a path. So beautifully written. What an enchanting, profound, wonderful, sensitive story of self-finding. I feel privileged to have listened to it. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
The emotional depths and beauty of your poetic storytelling is a gift to us. Thank you for sharing, Paul. Wow, what a journey. Such an incredible, inspiring journey. So it was just absolutely beautiful and well worth listening to, because it was a story. I mean, obviously, you know, in a poetic form, but it really, I felt just taken in and wanting to know what happens. So well done. It was just beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So lots of people are just loving it here. So what would you say has been your greatest achievement, or, you know, what are you most proud of?
So growing up, I was in a really poor family.
Mm-hmm.
So My dad was a day laborer, probably worked 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs. Mom stayed at home trying to take care of the kids. Neither were very educated. So I think my mom made it to 8th grade. My dad made it through maybe 4th grade, the equivalent here in the States. So not a lot of focus on education, not a lot of money. I remember, days there was like a head of lettuce in the fridge, and that was it. A lot of fear and angst about possibly, being on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I grew up with. No money put away for college. No chance of me going to school. My brothers and sisters didn't go to school. They either went into the military, got married very young. But I think I mentioned that there was quite a bit of difference between their ages and mine.
Yeah.
So I loved books and I loved to learn. So I would scrimp and save, if I got a little bit of birthday money or something, I would go to, I'd go to the library and get books, but I would buy a book at Goodwill or, a thrift store or whatever. And so I had my own little library. I love books. I love learning, and I was not going to let that happen. I wanted to go to school. It was interesting, though, because my dad, being a laborer, honestly did not support that decision. So I would come home from school and he would hide my books, say, "You study too much."
Okay.
There's no need for you to go to college. Your brothers and sisters didn't. Why do you think you need to? So I've lost touch with him, and I wish I even remembered his name, because I would probably write him a thank you note every single day. But I had a very good counselor in high school, and he knew what I wanted to do. He knew that there was absolutely no way I was going to be able to afford to do it on my own. And also, I was a good student, by the way. I scored really high in all my tests, did very well. I'm not sure if it's the same system in Europe, but we have valedictorians here, so I was valedictorian. He said, "I'm going to find a way for you to go to college." This man spent a year of his time putting together all sorts of packets for me for grants, for scholarships, and I got my way paid through college.
Wow. So
I went to school. I had dreams of becoming a chemist, which I did. So I became the career that I wanted to do. Went to university, went to school, met my wife there, and we've been married for 34 years now.
Wow.
So that's another big success. So I think it's basically the big success is working my way out of poverty, just making sure that I did something a little bit different from my brothers and sisters, and I'm very happy, very satisfied with where I've landed up.
Wow. It's really interesting, from an early age to decide what it is you want. And given that, it wasn't going to be supported within your own family, for the reasons you laid out. And that didn't stop you. And then it's like we all need one person who can see us as maybe we don't see ourselves, or have faith in us, or can encourage us, or find that spark within us and nurture it to take us on the path we need to go. So what was your family's reaction when you got your degree, when you qualified?
So by the time I graduated, my dad was already gone.
Okay.
And so my mom, honestly, she didn't say anything one way or another. She wasn't against it, but it was funny. My mom was in her late 60s at that time. And I mentioned that she didn't complete her education. We have an equivalency program here in the States called the GED. And she went back in her 60s or 70s and got her GED.
Oh, well done.
She decided that she felt that maybe education was important. It wasn't going to do anything for her at that point, but she wanted to do it.
Well done.
Kind of cool.
That's brilliant. Oh, that's a wonderful story. And I mean, I know it's great now. When I was growing up, it was like if you didn't finish, well, what you call high school, secondary school, if you didn't get that leaving cert, you know, that was the one ticket to a good life.
Mm.
And so many people I know who had to leave school early for various reasons, you know, maybe to support their families. But now you can go back to education at any time. And it doesn't have to be through the university system. You can, but there's many ways that education is so much more open up to people now, thank goodness.
Yep.
It's possible and doable despite your disadvantage or the late start. And actually, as a mature student, because I was a mature student, well, I went to college at 17 for 2 years and didn't open a book. I was too busy growing up. And then I went at 25 and then at 32. No comparison between the 25-year-old and the 17-year-old. As an older, mature student, hungry for learning with life experience and all of that. I think it's just fascinating. Mm-hmm. Poppy says, how encouraging to hear your story. When she was 14, her mother burnt her Bible because her parents thought she read it too much. My goodness. And Anne says, people like that counselor deserves to be celebrated. What a gift. And Marina says, teachers are so powerful and they are not always recognized. That is so true. You can destroy a child's mind or nourish them to be their best. Not everyone has family support. As an ESL teacher, super part-time job, I loved the story you relate about your experience. And Timey says, a wonderful, miraculous journey, Paul. I'm so very happy for your happiness. And Sandy says, that's a real triumph over adversity story. I'm so pleased your tutor was guided to help you achieve your ambition. Yeah. It's a wonderful story, and you know, determination and hard work, and luck. You know, meeting that teacher at the right time, and somebody who would spend a whole year, invest all of that time in you to get you to that place, and then you able to take it. Because often we get opportunities and we miss them or don't take them, or whatever stuff is going on in our own heads that we're not able to. We sabotage or whatever it is. That's incredible. So that's what you're most proud of. What's the most reckless thing you've ever done?
Reckless. Okay, well, I mentioned I went to college and I was in a fraternity, so there's like a whole slew of years worth of stuff there. But like more on the adult.
You remember?
I remember. Good point. So when we talked before, you had mentioned that you might mention something about regrets, and I think that this was kind of this all ties in together. So it's not necessarily reckless. So my answer to that was going to be, honestly, I don't really believe in regret so much. So I have the pretty firm belief that we do multiple lives, and we sort of plan our next adventure ahead of time. We forget it because if we knew what the ending was, it would spoil the whole thing. But we plan things out. So if something were to pop up and it would typically be something that would be regretful, I typically stop and say, well, wait a minute, I planned this whole thing. So what am I actually supposed to be learning here? So the one thing that really sticks in my mind was, I've mentioned that I've been in the technology sector for a long time. I was with a company that I loved, but there were things going on at that particular position. Another company came along, offered me a ton of money, and I went to that company honestly just because of the money. It turned out horrible. So it was a startup company, and those of you that kind of follow the industry, startup companies spin up, they burn out fast. The money was good, the hours were horrible, the environment was horrible. I had left a job that I loved, and there wasn't any going back. So that was definitely a situation that I would consider, it was regretful. It was dumb and reckless at the time because I did it just for the money. But I did learn a lot from it. So I was at a very high leadership role. So I learned how to get through adversity at that level and how to help the people that work with me and for me to do the same thing.
Okay.
Because I'd had it easy at the other job. The other job was so relaxed and so everything just worked right. Not the case with this one. I learned a lot about the business. There were some very arrogant and financially unsound decisions made by that company. So I learned a lot, and it turned out well because I'm back at that original company that I loved.
Oh, right.
So they hired me back eventually, and I am now bringing back all of this that I had learned. My boss, he's retiring tomorrow, but the boss that I've been with for 20 something years, he calls it my sabbatical, because I went off and I learned so much that I brought back to this company. We just went through a few initiatives, and he's like, what did you learn over there about? Oh yeah, we're not going to do that. I remember how bad that went for you. So it all turned out well. So it was a learning experience. So
wow.
That's probably as an adult, the dumbest, most reckless thing I did was just doing something for the money. And so now I've learned that lesson. There are a lot more important things than money.
It's really interesting. I mean, you went into an adverse situation, for the wrong reasons, or maybe superficial reasons or whatever. And yet into a horrible working environment, and yet all that you learned that you are using still.
Yeah.
And Gemma says sometimes we have to learn what not to do. That is so true.
Mm-hmm.
But then it comes back, and you're welcome back, the prodigal employee or the prodigal chemist, or software person now. But just to be how it works out in the end, that creating an adverse situation to learn from it. And Timey says, Paul is so right. We cannot foresee our blessings. That's true. And that's a very good example of, doing something dumb with a really good outcome, but you wouldn't recommend that people do that.
Right. I mean, in the midst of it, you say, yes, I regret this. It was a dumb decision. But afterwards, when you have the time to separate from it and to look back, that's sort of like, well, I don't regret this.
It happened for a good reason.
It happened. It might have been uncomfortable. It might have been an unfortunate decision, but I learned from it. So I can't yell at my higher self for having put that in front of me, because I made this choice somewhere along the way, and it served its purpose. So.
And I was going to say, and if you hadn't done it, you wouldn't be bringing that experience to your work again. Right. Yeah. Right. Timey says, without doing that, you don't get experiences. That's so true. Yeah. Wow. What are you grateful for?
My wife. She's always at the top of the list. She's what I live for. So not much more I can say about that. But I know that there are a few people on the call that I'm friends with on Facebook or whatever. They'll probably attest to it. My wife and I absolutely adore each other. We enjoy each other's company. We have fun. We're both jokesters. So we just have fun. We laugh. So that's the best decision I ever made. And the best part of my life was getting married to my wife.
It's lovely. Is she a Druid?
She's not. So, and that's interesting. So she doesn't have a religious background. She has a spiritual background. She's actually it's not her day job, but she's a Kundalini yoga instructor. So there's a tight tie-in to some of the Sikh religions, some of the Sikh practices. And it's kind of funny, because as I'm going through some of my training, I might read some of the Gurs to her, or talk about something that we're talking about. Hopefully I don't give any spoilers or anything, but like the light body, we're talking about the different.
Fairly basic. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. She'll be like, oh yeah, I've got exactly the same thing. And we compare notes, and there's so much overlap. Kind of like we said, there's that thread between different faiths and beliefs that we're doing the same stuff. We're just doing it with different names.
Yeah. I mean, there's many ways of expressing it, and it's about being able to find that common thread, which is beautiful. Yeah. Apart from your wife, what brings you joy?
Well, 'cause I love to make people laugh, and I love helping people. So I'm an Enneagram too, so that's kind of baked into me. But anything that I can do to make other people's lives better and more enjoyable and have fun. In addition to my technical career, so my side job. I'm actually a coach, and I do something called heart math coaching. So that's helping people with stress and anxiety. I'm a mindfulness practitioner, so I help people with that too. So that brings me joy. Other people's successes, other people doing well, that's what I thrive on.
Lisa says, feeling kind of crappy at the moment, but just wanted to say that I appreciate you and everyone. Thanks for sharing. Be well.
Thank you.
And David says you're going to make a great mentor if you just that's what he's saying there. So it's lovely to be I mean, obviously you are of service already. And you mentioned heart math. Can you explain what that is to our viewers?
Yeah, so there's actually science behind this meditative practice. So what it is the heart actually has its own brain. And we can talk to that brain, and we can have that brain do things for us. So there are a couple practices that can be taught. So for example, if you're in a nervous situation, there's a breathing pattern and a mental pattern that you can go into to calm that whole situation down. So you're constantly, it's called coherence. You bring your body, your heart, everything into alignment. And not only does it impact you, but our heart's constantly putting out wavelengths, and I think if I remember correctly, it's 10 feet from the last study. So if we were in a room and we're standing 10 feet from each other, my heart is actually talking to your heart. Not on any kind of woo-woo level, it's physically talking. The wavelengths are interacting with each other. So if I go in, if you are very stressed out and you were having an anxiety attack, and I could be near you and I go into the state of coherence, it will actually start causing your heart to go into that same state. I can help calm you down just by being in the same room. And so I've also had a little bit of training and practice for doing this for first responders. So for example, if I was on, if there was a fire and either the first responder or somebody involved with that was having an anxiety attack, for example, me just being there, in theory, would help that person to calm them down, to help even it out. It also brings a level of awareness, appreciation, enjoyment into the practitioner's life. So, because that's what you use as a tool. You're actually using those feelings of gratitude and appreciation to tap into the heart center. So you're basically waking that brain up and saying, hey, go do the thing you're good at. So
beautiful. Liz has a question. What happens when people standing 6 feet apart?
Even better effect. It's just,
okay. So it's your 10 is your.
It's the max, yeah, roughly.
Okay.
So within, and what's interesting is if you get in a group, it ripples. So if you're in a room and you have 2 or 3 practitioners, it starts amplifying. And there's actually this theory. This is a little woo-woo, but if at any point in time 1% of the world population were in coherence at the same time, it would flip the entire planet to this state of coherence. There would be no more anger, no more fear, no anxiety. So we actually have, there's this global coherence initiative. So once a month, those of us that are trained in this, we get together and do our practice at the same time. Maybe someday 1% of the population will be doing that, and we'll see what happens.
I remember hearing about this almost over 30 years ago, that a group of meditators went to Beirut in the Lebanon, when there was a lot of, I mean, the Lebanon is still, you know, a troubled place, but you're talking about 30, 35 years ago. And they meditated for a week, and Beirut quietened down. The level of violence stopped, or really reduced dramatically. And then when they left, it started up again. And there's something that always struck with me, the power of meditation, or you're talking your heart. I don't know if they were doing heart math, if that had been developed at that point, but you're talking about different techniques that have the same purpose. Wait a second, there was some question. Does this carry over via the internet? I feel my heart glowing with you all.
So if you're a believer in Reiki, yes, because basically it's the exact same science behind it. It's just that those that practice Reiki do have the belief that you can transmit it.
Yeah. And Neem, I don't know if I pronounced your name, Neem. Okay. I find being in a group very stressful. It makes me anxious and want to escape. I should maybe look into your practice. Yeah. Because, I mean, obviously some groups, if there's a lot of incoherence as opposed to being incoherence,
yep.
If you're a sensitive, you know, I pick stuff up. But then I know when somebody comes into a room and you feel, yeah, that sense of, that sense of relief and healing when a certain somebody comes into the room. It's fascinating. Philippa says, I've seen this in action, not called the same, but unconstitutional love from heart to heart. And Gordon says, yep, a wee bit of angina is stressful. If stressful, meditation and mindfulness helps when sharing with trees in a forest. I agree with you there. Heartfelt shared in a certain stone circle with trees. People dealing with, this is Lisa, people dealing with the floods need this. I've been having stress over tuning in with my family. So many places and old trees falling. I really have been having to work on the coherence thing. It's been difficult. Yeah. Oh, Philippa says unconstitutional love, unconditional love. That was a great typo or autocorrect or whatever, but unconditional love from heart to heart. Yes, that makes more sense. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a great exercise to have that, you know, dealing with all of these floods, fires, whatever it is that we're dealing with at the moment, to be able to do that. And I'm really interested. You said what, 1% of the world population?
Yeah, that's their theory. Is if it was 1% of the world population were in that state of coherence at the same time, the effect of that would be so great on the planet, on the world population, that everyone would shift into coherence, and there would be no more war, you know, no more, because basically your ego kind of dissolves too. So the whole idea of fear, jealousy, hate, all of those just go away, and basically everyone just appreciates and connects with each other, kind of the way we're supposed to be.
Okay. Is that permanent, or is it okay? So 1%. So we've got 8 billion, whatever 1% of 8 billion is. I can't do the maths. We all slip into it. How does that get to be maintained, I wonder?
Well, I think at that point, there wouldn't be, in theory, anyone that has any of those thoughts that would pull you out of it. You know, think about it. If you're in a room, let's make this a smaller. If we were all in a room, and we just all truly loved and appreciated and cared about each other, if everyone had that exact same feeling, is there anyone in the room that's going to think about hurting anybody else? Is there anyone that's going to think poorly of anyone else in that room? Probably.
Okay, I get that. How long does that last afterwards? So everyone goes home after everyone's brilliant. And I wonder, how long does it last?
Well,
does it have to be maintained, I wonder?
Let's assume we're not going to watch TV or anything, and we'll say that it'll be maintained at that point. But
Marina says, I've heard about this theory from other people from different spiritual backgrounds. So Blake says, everyone is shifting into coherence, idealistic, but a dream and vision worth dreaming into being, lofty goal, but one worth aiming for. The success is had by attempting it all, no matter the result. Well, I think so, because I think even the people who are going into being in a coherent state themselves And if so many of us try to do that, even at that, it may not shift the whole world, but it'll shift our own little place wherever we are.
Yeah.
Vivian says there's a very interesting technique called the trust technique, which is a way of sharing mindfulness with other animals and people, which seems to follow similar theories. I don't know if I mentioned it here, but I've had experiences with horses. Horses are very, very sensitive to you and to your mood. And I'll just share two. It's just interesting, that thing about animals. I was in a place called Omey Island. It's a tidal island off the west coast of Ireland. And you drive onto it when the tide is out. Anyway, I'd spent a weekend there. I was the only one there. And I was walking down through, there was a house that was abandoned, and walking down through the path. And there were lots and lots of Connemara ponies there. And I knew that if you're with horses, you just breathe with them. Because horses can be quite scary, and particularly if you've got a whole herd of them. And then there were mares and foals, and I wasn't sure how protective the mares would be or how they might perceive me as a threat. Anyway, I'm walking on the path, and then I stop and I'm just breathing, just focusing on my breath. And a mare comes over with her foal, and then she starts hugging me and holding me, and then I'm crying. And then this other horse comes, and the two of them are talking about love bombing me, one here and nibbling at me, and I'm breathing and I'm crying and I'm breathing. And then the horse that had come, the second one, moved away and peed, and I realized it was the stallion. Anyway, I stayed a little bit longer with the mare, and then I said goodbye to them all, and I went down the path, and I continued down, and I climbed over a gate, and I looked back, and on the gate there was a sign that says, "Beware of the stallion." Then last May, I was visiting friends, and they have 22 horses on their land, and I'd injured my knee, and it was always paining me when I was driving. And it had been paining me on my way while I was driving to their house. And we went around visiting the horses. And John was telling me, if you, at the back of the mane, if you scratch them there, they can't reach that. And that's what horses do to groom. And so I was doing that. Well, we'd gone to all of the fields, met all the horses, but the last three. So there's Arwen, Meadow, and Bell. Yes, Gemma, it's John and Sandra's horses I'm talking about. And in Cavan. Sandra's a member of the order. And so I was doing that with the three horses at the back. And then they came and they love bombed me. So they were nipping me with their teeth. One was this side, one was this side, and Meadow was behind me. She started with my neck, my back, all the way down my right leg, behind my right knee. And I said, she knows what she's doing. I haven't had pain since.
Wow.
And I was like, so there's something about horses for me. It's just pure, that resonance. And again, it was about breathing. So I wasn't doing that technique. Yeah, Meadow is the white mare. That's right, Gemma. She knows her. And and I was obviously in a state of coherence, but I was just focusing on my breath and just engaging with these and watching and doing what they can't do for themselves. What they do for each other. And it was just incredible. And my knee has been fine. I had been for acupuncture and all sorts of stuff, which had gone a long way, but the last bit hadn't healed, and they do that. So it's just pure magic.
That's very cool.
So doing it with animals and then doing it with humans. So let's all start thinking about getting into coherence. I mean, I'm sure there's many ways of getting into coherence. I don't know, with your heart math, you have a particular rhythm or a breathing technique, yes?
If we have a few minutes, I can actually...
Yes, we do. It'd
Okay.
be lovely.
All right. So typically when I first teach this, I ask people to close their eyes. Now you can do this with your eyes open. I actually will eventually teach people to do it with their eyes open, because if you're in a meeting in the boardroom, you can't stop and close your eyes. So go ahead and close your eyes.
Okay.
And get seated comfortably. Your hands in your lap or your feet on the floor. If you are laying down, that's fine. So what I want you to do is just start breathing a little bit more deeply and a little more slowly than you normally would. So you're just going to be breathing in and out, whatever speed is comfortable for you, but just slowly and deeply. And now as you breathe in and out, slowly and deeply, I want you to imagine that that breath is actually going out and in through your heart center. Move your attention from your head down into your heart center. So you're breathing in and out, slowly, deeply into your heart center. Now, as you do that, I want you to bring up feelings of something that you truly appreciate, love, or hold gratitude for. It could be a person, an experience. Really feel what that brings to you. The emotion in your body. Maybe there's a scent, a feeling on your skin. So you're breathing deeply and slowly through that heart center and just feeling appreciation, love, gratitude. You can stay in this state or just slowly bring yourself back to your normal awareness, your normal breathing. Open your eyes when you're comfortable. So that technique is called quick coherence. So you can employ that at any time if you're feeling stress, anxiety. So the science behind it, just real quick, the breathing is, we do that for a lot of different practices. If you're a yoga practitioner, that's really common. That actually taps into the vagus nerve and will force you to slow down. The one thing that HeartMath does a little bit different is that they found that the feeling of gratitude and appreciation actually has a chemical impact. It automatically decreases the level of cortisol, which is the stress chemical in your body. So those two states, the lower stress and basically knocking your vagus nerve out, are the triggers for your heart going into that state of coherence. And it can actually be measured. I have a little meter that I can hook myself up to and watch my level of coherence. It's called heart rate variability. And so I know when I'm at the right spot. So you could practice that. It's super easy to do. Over time, try doing it like maybe 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And once you get practiced at it, you can drop into it pretty quickly. If you feel yourself getting stressed, you just do a couple of deep breaths, get into that feeling of appreciation, and you'll be good.
Julia said, adding the gratitude was the key for me. It really worked in relaxing me. That's what she says. Yeah. I was at a talk with a guy who had suffered severe trauma as a baby and was constantly on alert for many, many years and went into addiction and everything, and has come out of it. And he said 3 things: his breath, gratitude, and the other one was meaning, being of service. And I think you've demonstrated that with actually, you know, you're teaching it, being of service, focusing on the breath and gratitude. Blake, can you, or he's asked for, have you a website that, or that we could put, I could put in for about the HeartMath?
Let me see if I can actually pull up the address. I want to make sure that it's still active before I do that. Just a second. I'd hate to lead you down the wrong path.
And while you're doing that, Lisa, who was feeling not great earlier, thank you, Paul. That really helped. Yes, gratitude. So
there is a little bit of. Do I have a way to send you a link, or just the website, or?
You can't put it into the chat. No, if you.
Sure. Well, I can. So there's actually, I do have a coaching website that you can go to, and there's a little link on that about HeartMath stress, and then also about heart-focused leadership.
What's that? www.
Yeah, the website is, you know, HTTPS, you know, and the slashes, but it's motoring forward.
HTTPS, and what comes after the S? Does a colon or?
Yeah, the colon.
And then the 2 forward slashes, yes.
Forward slashes. And this is all run together because it's a website, yep. But it's motoring forward coaching.com. That's so the story behind that is I'm a Mini Cooper fanatic. So all of all of my coaching stuff has sort of like a little fast car.
Motoringforwardcoaching.com.
Yes.
Okay. Great. And then Lisa says, by the way, there was a great enclave of HeartMath in Humboldt County where floods are. So thank you.
Good.
That's great. Oh, an error occurred. Oh, that was just with Facebook. Wait a moment. Anyway, it's gone on to the YouTube chat. Oh, it is. Sorry, it's gone on to, anyway, some strange thing. It's, so Gemma says, thanks a million, Paul. You're wonderful to listen to. A tonic this evening. Thank you, Paul. Thanks. So it's been just really, we're not over yet. There's a few more minutes. So any concern what concerns you about the modern world?
I think the biggest thing that comes to mind, and I'm assuming it's worldwide, it's not just an American thing, but the sort of lack of civility and the disconnect from reality that we seem to be experiencing. There's so much polarity, you know. As a country, we used to pretty much think the same thing. You know, we felt the same way. We had basically similar values. That isn't the case anymore. Same thing from the world, you know, basic things. You cared for fellow people. You wanted to make sure that they weren't hungry. If they were hungry, you fed them. If they were sick, you took care of them. That's not religious specific. It's human or humane, and that seems to be going away. And I don't know why, and it concerns me. So.
And what gives you hope then?
Well, what gives me hope is I know that there are people that are trying to do something about it, whether it's in their own family, within their own community, within their state, within their practice. There are people doing things about it. It's just when you take that global perspective, it just seems so big.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, you know, I was thinking, you know, I don't know how many of us were doing that coherence exercise. And, you know, it's 1 in 100. It does 1% is very small. And interesting to be able to practice that. You know, I was just thinking, if we're at a gathering in Glastonbury and there's 200 people or there's 400 people, it only needs 2 people or 4 people to do that. That's very small.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or if you're in your school, or it depends on what kind of company you work in, to be able to do that. I think it's just, it you know, it makes the impossible possible.
Yeah, I think we sometimes underestimate what is possible.
Yeah. Yeah, Karen says, a lovely discussion tonight. Good to be reminded of the healing properties of gratitude. Thank you both. Gabriella, I don't believe it's going away, Paul. I think the bad cases are more visible around in the media. There's much more goodness and gentleness in the world today than in the past.
Good.
I hope there is in face-to-face, because people tend to behave each other much better when they're in front of somebody. I think it's the anonymity of social media, that people don't have to take responsibility for how they behave, that they wouldn't do it if they were in front of somebody. So having platforms like this, I mean, you and I are having a really interesting conversation, and then people are joining in, and people are really well behaved. and it's lovely. So here's, you know, how social media works in a really positive way, and the fact that you taught us that technique. Michelle Alou just said that, you know, she's experiencing heartbreak as a result of grief, and she got a few moments relief from that, and so she's going to practice it more. So something like that helps somebody like her, or I'm feeling much better and calmer now. That and not just the breath, but the gratitude word. A lot of people have commented on that. There is that, but we tend to see so much of the negative, and it's almost like we forget. So maybe, and Gabriella, you're probably right, is that face to face there is still a lot of goodwill, but we only see this because that's news. Yeah, Lisa says, absolutely an online thing. I don't engage with people who do that online because they generally aren't listening to it when they're like that. I just send love. Well, yes. All you can is do that, because you're not going to change people by fighting with them. It's the only by. So if we can think of that breathing technique, that heart math, I think there's a very nice thing to come away with. Blake says an exercise in restraint. Yes. So it's thank you, Paul. Every time I type, the film gets muted, but really appreciating what gifts you're sharing with us. Many blessings. Sandy was a guest a few weeks back. So listen, it's been an absolute joy talking to you. I loved your piece of writing and that magical journey you went on, and it was great to. So I had no idea you were going to do the heart math. You know, this is what's so lovely about these conversations. We never know which way they're going to go, and it's just been such a joy. So my last question is: what is your favorite time of the year, or favorite season of the year, and your favorite ceremony for the Wheel of the Year?
Okay, so it's because we're in the desert. It's definitely after the break in the heat, so it would be fall. And my favorite time is Samhain. So, you know, working with the change of the season, the going inside, going into ourselves. It's the chance to rest, recover, and kind of just start getting ready for the planting for the next year. So that's definitely my favorite time.
Oh, wonderful. Well, there are lots of, thank you so much. There are lots of comments about people like Tom says, it's just as simple to chat with when I get coffee at the train station. I now know there's people who work there, and my heart jumps choosing that. It's lovely, you know, that so people are doing, I do a lot of breathing. I love the idea of feeling gratitude. Thank you. This is from Lisa, especially for the meditation. It really helped. All blessings to you. I'll definitely be practicing this. Thank you so much, Paul. Your story was truly uplifting and opening and enriching. This talk today was a total surprise somehow. It was wonderful. Thank you both. Poppy says it's called Heart Coherence Collaborative, but make sure you look it up. Look up Paul as well. Thank you very much. Wonderful conversation, everyone. I'd love to connect with you, Paul. Somebody saying the whoops is too fast. Anyway, good. Your website is there. So, because he's in Delaware, that's David. So I don't know how far Delaware is. Washington, is it?
Yeah.
But kind of, The other side. Okay. Right. Over there on the right. All right. So it's just been such a joy, and I want to thank you so much. So I'll allow you say goodbye to everybody, and then we'll talk later. We just look over the comments. So I'll let you say goodbye to everybody.
Right. Well, and thanks for your time, everybody. I hope you're leaving with a little bit something useful. And again, I want to give special thanks to my mentors. So Cherry, Jackie, if you're here or if you see this sometime in the future, I wouldn't be here without you. So thank you again.
It's lovely to say that. Great. So I'll see you in a few minutes. So thank you all for joining in this evening and for your wonderful comments. And it's just lovely to see how what we were discussing resonated with you and how much you enjoyed listening to it. I won't be here next week or the week after. So I am away, and it's my daughter's 21st in 2 weeks' time. And that's an important celebration on this night, 2 weeks, or this time, 2 weeks. So until then, I wish you all the best. I'll be back on, anyway, it's 3 weeks' time. I can't think of the date. Forgive me. So I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, have a good evening, good morning, good afternoon, and until we meet again, slán go fóill.